وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on His last Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and on all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. The topic of today's khutbah was the fear of death. The Imam began the presentation by asking the question, why do we fear death? Why do we fear something which we have not tried out? Normally, we fear fire because we've been burnt by it. So something we have experienced. And from that experience, we understand its dangers and its harm, etc. And as such, we fear it. This is the normal practice. So why is it then that we fear death? Since none of us have experienced it, to come back and to speak about it. He proposed that the reason for our fear is perhaps partly instinctual. This is something which is shared with all the animals. That all of Allah's creatures have a natural desire to try to survive, to not allow itself to be destroyed. This is something built in every one of Allah's creatures. But beyond that, we who above the remainder of Allah's creatures have an ability to intellectually understand, to go beyond our instincts. Why then do we fear something which must come? Something which is unavoidable. And at the same time, we love so dearly, so deeply, something which must go. This world and the things of this world. It's a question that we do need to reflect on. If our intelligence was serving us properly, then we shouldn't fear something which is unavoidable. Death, which comes to everyone, we know will come. No matter what we do, we will die. Something that is so definite, we should not have a fear of. And the thing that we know we will lose, we know without a doubt that we cannot take this world with us. We will leave everything behind, everything we have gathered, house, car, wife, children, everything. We cannot take them with us. We are absolutely certain about that. So, then our intellect, if it is serving us well, it should tell us that we cannot become too attached to this world. However, the opposite is the reality. We fear death and we love this world. And this is one of the signs of our times. It is something which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ predicted would happen to Muslims. Because in his time, his companions were not afraid of death. And that is why they defeated peoples around them who were far greater and stronger than them militarily, far greater in numbers, because those people they were fighting feared death. But they didn't. And the Imam gave a number of different examples from the time of the Prophet Muhammad, and it would behoove all of us to read of the lives of the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, to read the authentic stories of their lives. There's a book called Companions of the Prophet, written by, compiled and translated by Abdul Wahid, published in England. Very good collection of stories of the companions. The material is, for the most part, authentic material. There are 3 volumes to it. 3 books, actually. It's very important for us to read of these stories, to have our children read of these stories, because it gives us something of the feeling of that early generation of Muslims, what their understanding of Islam did. What did it do for them? How did it change them? How did it make them different from the people of their time? Because the Prophet ﷺ spoke of the time in the future. 1400 years ago he spoke of a time when the world would partake in the destruction of the Muslim Ummah. The way that the animals, when you've got a group of animals, dogs or whatever, and you put a plate down with food, they all rush on the plate. Everyone is sticking its mouth and they're just gobbling up the food. He gave this metaphor, this symbol, that plate of food represented the Muslims of the future. And the companions asked him, was it because the Muslims would be few in the future? Would the numbers of Muslims get smaller and smaller and smaller until the world was, everybody had congregated against us and could easily destroy them? He said no. Their numbers will be many. Their numbers will be many. We always hear how many Muslims there are on the earth, about 1/3 of the population or 1/4 of the population, over 1 billion Muslims. And we see the reality of the Muslims. But he said there will be many, but they would be like the bubbles, the foam produced by the flood. When the flood comes through and it takes things away and it churns them up, there are bubbles which are created on the surface of the flood, having no strength, weak, useless. That's what they would be like. Many in numbers, billion, but they will be useless. And he went on to explain that they are useless because there had spread amongst them a love, a deep, strong love of this life and a fear of death. Death, the fear of death had reached into their hearts so deeply that they would do anything to stay alive. They would do anything to collect the trinkets of this world. And because of that, the nations would destroy them. And this is our state today. And of course, this state is not going to change until Muslims once again come back to the realization of the reality of this life and to the essence of the faith of Islam. The religion which is not just a series of rituals. You'll see people come into the masjid who will pray but they're not praying. You will see them playing with their headscarves, checking their watches, leaning on one foot and switching to the other foot, cracking their knuckles, doing all kinds of things. Praying but not praying. Because what is prayer about? They really don't know. It's just a ritual that my parents do, and I'm doing it. That's the state of Islam throughout the Muslim world. People are doing it because their parents did it. Why they did it, they don't really know, because their grandparents did it. But what is the purpose of prayer? What is prayer supposed to do for us? Are we doing Allah a favor by praying? Allah needs our prayer? Are we praying because we need to pray? And if we need to pray, why do we need to pray? These are the realities that we have to grasp for prayer to become meaningful, for Islam to become meaningful, to become a way of life and not just a series of rituals. And when Islam becomes a way of life, in truth, then we will lose the fear of death. And we will then be able to make Muslims the source of guidance for this world, the example of righteousness, the upholders of the law, the divine law, which should govern the lives of mankind. But the reality is that we today fear death because we don't know what comes after it. We don't know what we are going to find when we die. It is an unknown. Though Allah has told us in great detail about what we will find. He has explained to us when a person dies, what happens, the angels coming, taking the spirit, everything, the whole process, being in the state of the grave, the resurrection, the judgment, crossing over the bridge, going to paradise, going to hell, what is in paradise, what is in hell. This is all the unknown. But Allah, through revelation, has explained it to us in vivid detail. But because our faith has not gone beyond the state of meaningless rituals, then it remains unknown. All that has been explained is meaningless. It's still the great unknown. And human knowledge, which has advanced over the centuries, it has advanced fundamentally in the material areas. Societies have evolved materially. The technology is all in the material sphere. It has not explained or dissected or improved the quality of human spiritual life. Because the most technologically advanced societies are the ones in which the people are the most self-destructive. It's a reality. You find those societies that are building, going to the moon, etc. These are the same societies that are destroying the various creatures and the vegetation, the atmosphere. I mean, they're destroying the world. At the same time that they're advancing technologically, they're destroying the world. And they destroy themselves. You find that the rate of murder, suicide, AIDS, diseases, etc., is just higher and higher and higher amongst them. So this tells us, for those of us who reflect, that the advancement in technology really does not provide stability to society. That ultimately the stability comes in faith. It is spiritually based. And it is only when people are spiritually advanced that they find stability in this life. This is one of the things which amazed some Westerners and caused them to become Muslims when they came across Muslims under the worst of circumstances, yet they seem to have a spiritual calmness, an ability to deal with their circumstance in spite of the severity of the calamities which befell them. And this is coming out of Islam. There is no way that the Western society can explain how it is that some people would seek death, whether today or whether in the past. When those early empires came across the Muslims, they tried to understand. They brought them, sat them down and tried to understand from them how it is that these people were not afraid of death. They couldn't understand it then, and the society cannot understand it today. So, for us, those of us who realize the inescapable that is death, we realize it is something we cannot escape. And we have a commitment to Islam, a commitment to faith. Then we have to prepare ourselves. Because if we, in fact, accept that death is inevitable, and we consider ourselves to be practicing Muslims, then our actions should reflect our preparation for death. Now, preparation for death doesn't mean, as for some people, you take your coffin, you buy it from today. You know, this is the cloth that they wrap your body with when you die. And when you love people, they will buy it now. Then you go to Mecca and you wash it in Zamzam water. And you take it back and keep it in your cupboard. No, this is not what is meant when they say we prepare for death. Because of the fact that we've understood what is coming after, that we will be held to account for what we do in this life, we prepare for death by doing what Allah has commanded us to do in this life, in order that we would achieve in the next life what He has promised. This is how we prepare ourselves properly for death. We understand that it doesn't make sense to fear death. Because if we fear death, then in fact we are fearing Allah, who created death. And Allah has promised us, or informed us, that He created life and death in order to test us who is the best indeed. We are enjoined to fear Allah. but not fear in the sense that we avoid. See, because you have two forms of fear. This is the fear that we're talking about, which is not acceptable. We are commanded by Allah to fear Him. This is a part of faith. Fear Him in the sense of fearing the harm that will come to us as He has promised if we disobey Him. This is how we fear Him. Not that we fear like you fear fire by avoiding fire. You fear a lion by running away from it. No, we don't fear Allah in that way, running away from Allah, because we cannot run away from Allah. And that's the way we do not fear death. We do not fear death by trying to run away from it, trying to escape it, because we can't escape it. We fear it in the sense that we know that it is coming, and we fear to be unprepared for it. That aspect of fear we all should have. But the fear which has become rooted in people's hearts, in all of our hearts, wherein we are trying to avoid it at any cost, that fear we have to root out. And we have to replace it by preparation, by acceptance of the reality, and by preparing ourselves for it. As Allah has told us in the Quran, we should make the dua, Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alameen. That is verily our prayer and rites of worship, sacrifices, our life and our death should be dedicated to Allah, in accordance with the will of Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. This dua should be a reality in our lives. Because whatever good we do in this life, we are doing it for ourselves. This is the believer who understands that death is a reality. He has to prepare for it. He does so by realizing that whatever good he does in this life, he or she does in this life, it is for themselves. It is for ourselves. Whatever evil we do, ultimately is against ourselves. We might think we are getting back at somebody, or we're hurting somebody in this life. Yes, we are hurting them, but in the end, if what we have done is unjust, then we are hurting our own selves more. Because the hurt of this life is nothing in comparison to the hurt of the next life. This is why Allah said that whatever evil we do in this life is really against ourselves. Because the greater result, the greater punishment for that evil, or the harm that comes from it, comes on ourselves in the next life. So death for us is just a transition, something which is unavoidable. And as such, we should go to the graveyard, remind ourselves that it's coming, that transition is coming. We should visit the sick to comfort them, and also to remind ourselves that we can get sick anytime, and from that sickness we can die. Health is something which is a blessing from Allah, which He can take away at any time. So we need to prepare in our health for the times of our sickness. And of course, the worst that can happen to us as Muslims, as we have been taught by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the worst that can happen to us is that we die in a state of shirk. We die in a state of worshipping others besides Allah, others along with Allah. And the only way that we can protect ourselves from such a situation is by understanding the principle of Tawheed well and applying it on our lives. Unfortunately, much of what is written about Islam, when we look at the spectrum of materials in any given library on Islam, we'll find much material talking about economics, Islamic State, crime and punishment, Salah, Zakah, but very little material on Tawheed. You'll find books talking about the fundamentals of Islam, and Tawheed is given a paragraph. Allah is one, finish. As a result, those people who read and study about Islam today oftentimes miss some of this essential material which should form the basis of everything else. Our economics, our politics, everything, our prayer, everything has to be built on a solid foundation of Tawheed. Tawheed, which is not just a word. Allah being one, or the oneness of Allah, is more than just that statement. It represents the framework of the life of the believer. So it is essential for us to understand how Tawheed should operate in all of the facets of our lives. So, for those of us whose readings are limited in this area, I would suggest that they try to find whatever material is available. And I would personally recommend a book which I have written called The Fundamentals of Tawheed. If you haven't read it, then it is very essential for you to read it. It is perhaps one of the few books available in the Islamic library which deals in depth with the essential principles concerning Tawheed. And the Imam went on in the second part of the khutbah to remind us that when we die, as the Prophet ﷺ told us, all of our deeds in this life end. There is nothing more that we can do in this life. But we may continue to benefit after our death from three basic actions that we have done in this life. One, charity, which we have done, from which people continue to benefit. Knowledge, which we have passed on, which continues to guide others. And a child who we have left behind, raised righteously, who prays for us. So part of our preparation for death should involve giving as much in charity as we can. Because if we know what is coming afterwards, and we know that the only thing that can benefit us after we die is charity, which people continue to benefit from, then we need to try to find as many avenues for us to give of our wealth, so that we will continue to be able to benefit from it after we die. We need to find out as much about Islam as we can, and to educate others, so that those others will educate others, and that knowledge that we pass on not only benefits us personally in this life, but continues to benefit others, which would in turn benefit us in the next life. And we prepare for death also by looking after our children well, by trying to educate them as best as we can, primarily from an Islamic perspective. Of course, we have a duty to prepare them to survive in this world, so secular education is a part and parcel of their education. However, we should not allow that secular education and the need for it to become the most important aspect of education in their life. We should emphasize to them, and we should find avenues for them to educate themselves spiritually. By our example, by materials that we have them read, by bringing them in contact with other righteous young people, by involving them in gatherings wherein righteousness is spoken about, etc. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that whoever's last words were La ilaha illallah would enter paradise. And this is not something which is easy for one who has not lived La ilaha illallah. It is not something wherein a person on the deathbed who has lived a corrupt life, you may be able to go to that person and tell them to say La ilaha illallah, and they are able to blurt it out before they die. No. These words can only be said in a way acceptable to Allah by a person who has lived La ilaha illallah. So if we want our last words to be La ilaha illallah, if we want to enter paradise, as the Prophet Muhammad said, then we have to live La ilaha illallah now. And a part of that preparation, as Abdullah ibn Umar quoted the Prophet ﷺ as saying, was that if we have anything to will to others, that we want to be given to others after our death, we should not allow 2 nights to pass without writing it down. Ibn Umar had said that when he heard this statement of the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't allow, from that point onward in his life, any opportunity to pass to record what he wanted to leave behind. This is part of the awareness of death. So many people are caught. They had intentions of leaving things for others, but because they're unaware of death, they die and they never have the opportunity to write down what it is, what special things they wanted done to be left behind for others. So, it is our duty, if we are to be believers in reality and not believers merely due to having Arabic sounding names. If we are to be believers in reality, then we have to be amongst those who prepare for death. We cannot have in our hearts a fear, an overwhelming fear of death. Instead, we have to have an awareness of the reality of death, of what is to come, which is reflected in our preparations whilst we are living. In all aspects of our lives, we prepare ourselves for the inevitable.